Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to the Literary Hour. I'm your co-host, Jackie, and with me is my prof. Hi, prof. How are you?
Uh,
So today, uh, we apologize. Uh, Miss Joa is unable to join us. Don't leave the show. We have a show. As in one of her poems, she writes about LEC disco dancing. That is what happened. Miss Joa was patiently waiting, and then LEC happened, as we all know, and so she does not have electricity right now. We are going to reschedule her show. Please buy her book. It's called Under Duker Skies. Buy her book so that you can join in the conversation. So today, Prof and I, we're going to do what we do always. Sometimes when we improvise, we're going to discuss literature. We're going to discuss poetry. We're going to discuss the self, and we're going to invite questions or comments on the show. So please join us. Ask us anything literary, right, Prof? Anything literary.
that's right. Mhm.
Yes. So yeah, we will have Patrice another day. But as I said, please buy her books. Her book is on Amazon under Duca Skies. You can get it and get it on Kindle and read it. The poems are really, really good. Or you can get the book. If you're in Liberia, contact Patrice and you can get the book also that way. So today we're going to jump in and we're going to start discussing things literary, poetical, and self. Right, Brad? We're
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I again, the question of the self has to do with our individual likes and dislikes of poetry or what have you, literary forms and all that. So keep in mind that the self has to do with the personal outpouring of what we think about poetry, what we think about other forms of literature as the evening rolls on. That's what it is.
And I always say, unlike writing a book or an essay where you have to really have, well, you still have to have this coherence of thought, you know. But with poetry, because of the brevity, I feel that you have to put so much in so little. You know, I mean, E. E. Cummings did that. And of course, we know Emily Dickinson
Yeah.
in her very simple poetry, she brought forth so much. The other day I had posted about
So selects our own
it
society.
selects his
Yeah.
own company. You know, I mean,
Lord.
it's yeah. So it's poems don't always have to rhyme.
Mhm.
You know, poems can be like we say with E. E. Cummings, stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Poems can be very thick. You know that you have to wade through,
Yeah.
but because it's limited in its length, I guess, you know, not like a book that you can have 500 pages.
Mhm.
The poem has to, it has to hit you. It has to make you want to read it, to live it, to feel it. You
In
know, you
fact,
can go through a book. Sorry, prof. You can go through a book and maybe in the 20 on page 50, you're still reading the book. And you're like, okay, I know that more is to come. In a piece of poetry, you can start reading and say, oh, but I have only 15 lines left. And if it doesn't hit you the first two lines, you're done. Yeah.
in fact, that's what the very Emily Dickinson has said. That if you read a poem and you don't feel that the top of your head is being removed, then of course that is not a poem. Something in it. In fact, Edgar Allan Poe talks about the unity of effect. Something punchy, something that pounds you, and you get uh, the energy of it all, the heat of it all, the coldness of it all. If you don't feel that, or if you don't get the reader to feel that, then there's something missing. In fact, we've got to understand that uh, the original concept of poetry was that it was making an image. In other words, making something concrete that will hit you almost immediately, and you say, yes, I've really felt something. Yes, something has been left for me to kind of explore. So poetry in Greek means making images. Making images. That is
Yeah.
why when you write a poem and you ramble on and nothing substantive comes out, then of course it has the capacity of turning people off.
And I mean, we can talk about all of the most of the poets in the
Mhm.
world, but I think for me, negritude poetry was what I mean. It is something that I really love, because as Amy Cisier says, negritude is not absence but refusal
Mhm.
to be something else,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, I know today we're discussing things, but to talk about African poetry, to talk about the commonalities that we see, and we talk about that, about the community, we talk about that, about love of all things traditional, and then we kind of like sprinkle it with some proverbs like
Yeah.
Achibe does. I mean, in fact, it's funny because I listened to a lecture yesterday, and um she was talking, the speaker was talking about navigating this new world for Africa, this post-COVID world. And then she said, as Achebe says in Arrow of God, because the bird has learned, because man has learned to shoot without missing, the bird has learned to, Izela has learned to fly without perching,
Yeah.
and I laugh because it is true that these gems of wisdom, these little pieces, you know, they encapsulate so much, you know. I told you the other day about something I heard when I was back home, and the guy said, if you want to know if your Christmas will be okay, you will know it from the eve. I never heard that growing up,
Mhm.
So again, gems of wisdom, they travel from one country to the other,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then they reside, they take life in that country. Sometimes they take on the characteristics of that country, and then somebody else would
Takes that
change it
off.
for another culture. Yes. Yeah.
You
So
know, poetry, in fact, literature is, and we are talking about imaginary as well as uh, evocative type of literature. Uh, Talking about poetry, the more you find a nugget, you're talking about nugget, a nugget of phrase or something like that, and you go peeling, it's like you've got chocolate, and the chocolate is so wrapped in 2 or 3 layers, and at a particular point, you really want to get to the chocolate, and begin to bite into it. But if the wrapping is so well done, it has its rhythm. And if you are peeling it and peeling it and peeling, by the time you get to the chocolate itself, the bar itself, you believe that you've accomplished something. It may not be something to bring you all the wealth in the world, but that idea of doing that is something beautiful. And so if you write a poem, you get the phrases right, you get the words right, and you leave you leave the reader something to pour over. It is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. So that is why it is often said that if you want to write a poem, uh, as soon as the idea is coming to you, you don't just go rushing to write it. Let
yes.
it percolate. Let it simmer in your head. And when you get it out there, there's something that's been purged out of you. Also, that is beauty to it.
And sometimes circumstances give rise
Yeah.
to give rise to poetry. Well, not sometimes, almost all the time. They give rise to poetry. And so what happens is that this thing that, like you say, comes up in you,
Yeah.
it's almost like the human condition, because other people feel the same way.
Yeah.
So if you are writing about when I always quote Ozymandias,
Hmm.
you can you can see that, okay, he's talking about Ozymandias, but it can be used so many ways in life,
Yeah.
and again, I come back. I know we're just talking today, and I hope the audience will follow us and ask questions, but I come back to negritude because what intrigued me about negritude was it was almost happening the same time as the Harlem Renaissance.
Hmm.
So what happened was that the African Americans were talking about to be black and proud, you
Yeah.
know. Okay, and so
And they are
the Franco,
humanists. And they are
yes,
humanists.
the
Yes. Mhm.
humanists, and then the francophone blacks who were in France at the time, the Amis Cisier, the Diop,
Yeah.
from the Caribbean, the Senghor.
Hmm.
They decided that we ourselves refuse to be French. We are negritudinists. We will celebrate everything black, right? So you have these two groups across the ocean thinking that they have a commonality, which is fighting the powers that be
Yeah.
and loving everything black. But yet when they met, right? Because if you look at when they met, there was a huge confusion, because whereas the francophone blacks, they wanted total separation from France, well, at that time. But the African Americans were saying, no, 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 no. We just want to be seen as Americans
We
also.
must celebrate ourselves. Yes.
Yes, yes. So like Langston Hughes, and
Hmm.
and Claude
Hmm.
McKay, and the
Yes.
others, but Senghor said, no, 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 no. We don't want to be any part of France, which was ironic, because that's what happened. But you can, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can also read something in somebody's poetry that is not there.
They,
Do you
they,
see the underneath of things might not be what you think it is what I'm saying.
and here I like to do a separation where I, I like to point out that whenever you have a poem before you, whenever you have a poem before you, there is the primary reading. The primary reading uh, suggests that the words on the page, if it is a story being told, if it is a rat that jump on the table and then slip away and what have you, we should all be able to see that rat jumping on the table and slipping away. The words are there. But then you come to the secondary and indeed the tertiary reading, where the reader's response comes on board. It comes from the reader's background. It comes from the reader's culture and what have you. It is more of a representation of what this person sees. So instead of saying that, well, people say poems can be read anyway. This is where poems can be read anyway comes in, but it is not an absolute statement. The first statement is that what is on the page, we all should agree it is there.
Yes,
And then what it means to you, what it means to me, may be different from the backgrounds we've come. That is what should be understood. Otherwise, somebody will say, well, I will read it any kind of way, and therefore I will not even make an attempt to see what a word means, what it brings to the table of the conversation that the poem opens up for us to participate in. That's
okay.
uh-huh.
No, I agree that the reading of a poem depend on your lived experience,
Yes.
right? Depend on circumstances, because what you went through writing this poem is not my lived experience.
Mm.
But like you say, there must be some some
Some
connection,
understanding of the
some
words on the
understanding of the
yes,
words.
on the
Yeah,
page.
yeah, I do agree with that. So let's come now to the continent of Africa. We have to
Okay.
focus on this.
Okay.
So if you look at a poem or sonnet,
Okay.
like we talk about the libretto of for Liberia.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I don't know how many people have read Tolson's um, libretto for Liberia.
It's
Prof,
it's
do you want to
it's
talk a little bit about it because it's a masterpiece, I guess, about Liberia,
Mhm.
but I think it's written in such flowery language. For what he was a poet, but
Yes.
okay,
And also, I think he might have had some musical background as well.
yes, yes,
And what he tries to capture, it is an encapsulation of what Liberia went through to become what it eventually became, even after
yes,
all the suffering and all that kind of thing. He talks about the eagle, the sparrow, and all that. So what the beauty of poetry as well is that in maybe uh, 4 or 5 lines or even 10 lines, it tells a whole story. It
yeah,
tells the whole story. In that libretto, you find out that this guy is able to give the audience a sense of the suffering, the humiliation, the anguish that those who a kind of evolved Liberia went through, and yet they were able to, irrespective of the suffering. And you find such theme in even the national anthem. Okay, talk
yeah,
about though knew her name, green be her fame, and mighty be her powers. That sort of a thing. And
yeah,
then
and
go ahead.
no, I was uh, it was such a masterpiece at the time
Yes.
that he was given the poet laureate of Liberia, even though he's never been to Liberia. But I would encourage people to read it because it's one of the it's one of the I wouldn't say masterpiece, but it's one of the it's almost like Brighty Moore uh, what is it called, Liberian market women. There's something,
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it for those who don't know Liberia at the time, they were reading about an epic struggle
yeah. An
to
epic
be
struggle. That's the
an epic
phrase.
struggle
That's
to
a
be.
beautiful phrase. An epic struggle.
Yeah,
Yes.
epic struggle,
Yes.
an epic struggle to be.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's the struggle of Liberia.
An
You
odyssey.
know,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. You're right. Yeah, a journey. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. So I would encourage you to read it. Another one that I would say marks Liberia again, as you say, is biting more. It's a lot of Ebony Dust. A lot of his poems. And Prof, don't be modest. A lot of yours too.
I don't know.
A lot of yours. I just want to see if I can put a libretto here by Melvin Tolson. So for those who haven't read it, it's a long poem, so get some drinks. Libretto for Liberia.
Mhm.
Okay, I put it there. My first thing. Yeah. So get some drinks and then read it after our show. Don't read it now. So Prof, we come back now to the journey for self.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that Patrice is not here, because if for those of you who haven't bought the book, buy her book. It's
Yeah.
not a lot of money. Her book is a journey, and almost all of the authors we've discussed is a journey that they're taking, a journey to self-actualization,
Yeah.
self-realization,
Yeah.
a journey to be a more enlightened person.
Yeah.
We had Augustine Sharif, who you
Mhm.
can see the metamorphosis of his life through his changing of his
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
We had Bamba Sharif.
Mhm.
We had Dr. Togba Nanti Pote, who
Yeah.
also talk about his 80 years on
Mhm.
earth, and the things that he went through. He put them into chapters.
Yeah.
We had Mr. Cummings, but Mr. Cummings, it was not so much as an author, but
Mhm.
as someone in the public eye.
Mhm.
What are the books he had read, and how, excuse me, how they impacted him? And that's what we're going to do with. We're going to ask Patrice. Um, her pieces of poetry reflects
Mhm.
the journey
Yeah.
from the war years throughout. So please buy the book.
Yeah. And the thing about literature is that it kind of steers you, the writer, to make meaning of your life. And in the process of this writer making meaning of his or her life, uh, there's the invitation of you, the reader. The invitation is extended to you, the reader, to ask yourself, what sense do you make of this person's description of certain things, description of himself or herself? Uh, to what extent can you participate? Sometimes this is force on you, but the force is so reassuring that without your getting to know what is happening, you are also participating in it. Uh, if someone the other day, Mrs. Mark, uh, Professor Mark of the University of Liberia at the time, and from there she's done a lot of writing and what have you. She wrote a piece on her grandmother, and without even a second thought, I began to think about my own grandmother, my maternal grandmother. I'm a grandma's baby boy. And then I said, it would be a beautiful thing for people to get together, maybe 10, 15, 20, whatever the number, to write something about, even if it is 2 or 3 pages, write something about our grandparents. If it is not all the grandparents, it may be grandmothers or grandfathers, depending on the individual who had the most impact on you by teaching you little things about life. Proverbs. In Liberia, you talk about parables and what have you, which are supposed to be stories. But Proverbs, and life itself, as we always say, is a journey. We live from our mother's womb to the womb of the earth. In between those two wombs, there is something that every now and then comes up, and either it is an older person telling us, or even a, a peer group telling us about these things. So the short of the long has to do with the question of how well does literature impact one's life? How well does literature impact your life? The songs, oh my God, the songs, all these.
Prof, I agree with you. But we did that already when we tried to do uh, what does Liberia mean to you?
Yeah,
And,
well,
and I think that you may be right that people might have more. I mean, there might be more success when people start to write about their loved ones as opposed to Liberia.
yes,
What I had envisioned when we said, "What does Liberia mean to you?" I envisioned people personifying Liberia
yes,
and saying Liberia is like my lover, my
yes.
mother,
Uh-huh,
my
my father,
enemy,
yes.
my this. I was very surprised that there were not many people who could put into words what Liberia means to them. And I sometimes I will call you excitedly to say to you, because I think sometimes people think, oh, they're just talking. But like I said before, there is a huge project going on now in Ghana about what it means to be a Ghanaian. There's a book coming out, and I will find the name and put it there next time, about what my experience has been in America for immigrants. What does America mean to me? And sometimes I think that we have not sat down individually and as a group to really think about what this piece of earth means to us. So maybe we might have more success when we talk about our loved ones, our grandmothers, our
The
great
self.
grandmothers, the self. Yeah, the thing that's local, that's closer to you, you might be able to say it more than to talk about Liberia. But what I would like to say is that these things are not just topics for the literary hour or Liberians. This conversation is being held all over. The lecture I listened to yesterday on the post COVID reimagining what development is how do we see development in Africa, right? And why is it so endemic in us that when we say modernization, it must be westernization? Those are questions that we grapple with, and other people grapple with it as well. So when we talk about developing Liberia for post COVID, what does it mean? Development should also mean the arts. Development should also mean that if you talk about American literature, you talk about Mark Twain. You talk about Huckleberry Finn.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about Tom Sawyer,
Mm-hmm.
Ernest Hemingway.
Yes, in the
we,
same
we
way.
we talk about Wilton Sangawolo, Baiti Moore, and
Yeah,
and you know, and there are writers that are coming up in that tradition as well.
yeah.
But we will encourage people who are listening to write. It may be a journal, it may be something that you can look back on and say, "Oh, I have chronicled
Mm-hmm.
this year of my life, and this is my feelings towards Liberia."
Mm-hmm.
And you will see that sometimes it will vacillate. It goes up, it goes down, just
Yeah.
like a pendulum. But that's how it's gonna be. And then you say, it's not so bad or it's terrible. But we encourage you to write things down. It's like I said, the conversation is not just being held here. It's all over. People are talking about who are we as a people, and that can be a unifying focus for Liberians. Yeah.
The At the heart of it all, I believe, is one thing which has to do. When I say that, you're laughing. What? It's understanding the term, understanding the word, understanding the phrase. Once you've understood the term, once you've understood the phrase, then of course you can run with it. Because I often say something like, if you reduce writing to the barest minimum, it means making a statement and expanding on it. Making a statement and expanding on it. In the case of a definition, once you've defined what development is in your own sense, it's not what some scientific giant or some professor, philosopher. Once you understand what development is, once you understand what modernization or modern means, then of course you begin to expand on that by bringing in examples of things that you will see as development and what have you. A child who you've been rearing for some time, one fine day is able to read a letter to you and explain the letter. That is development. That is
Yeah.
development. This child has come to a certain level. So there can be a multiplicity, there can be a plethora of examples to provide when you are talking about a particular concept or when you're talking about a particular word. And probably this whole idea of, again, let me throw that big word, the intentionality, unless you talk about the purpose of what that word is geared towards and what have you, then of course you will not be able to see that person making the type of progress in terms of explaining himself or herself away.
Yeah, it's true. And Prof, one of the we come back to these different themes that
Yeah.
we see in the new writings coming out of Liberia. And a lot of them is trauma,
Yeah.
right? Trauma because of the war, what they went through. And then they have healing, right? There's this quest for healing. How do I heal? How do the people heal? After what we've gone through, after
Yeah.
this trauma we've gone through, how do we heal? And then you see acceptance. You know, it happened. I may not be healed, but I can deal with it. You know, I can make, well, I wouldn't say make peace, but I can live.
You, you know, I don't think you should call from using the word peace. You see, because there has to be. That is why I like how the local Liberian would say something like, "You make my heart lay down. You make my heart lay down." You know, that
Okay.
laying down is some sort of peace. You know, the idea that you are at home with yourself, irrespective of what might be going on, irrespective of what you might have gone through, there is something in you that tells you there is, and again, this is where hope becomes very much important. Their hope that something tomorrow is going to make a difference. You don't know that something is or what is going to be, but at least you feel that tomorrow it is going to get better.
I guess you're right, you know, because peace is relative, right?
Yes.
So in that way, I guess it will almost be, what can you live with?
What
You
can you
know,
live with? Yes.
what can you live with?
Uh-huh.
Yes, yes. If your family member died in a war, you don't know where they are buried. You've been grieving,
Yeah.
and there comes either acceptance, or
Yes.
if not acceptance, you say, you know what, I can still talk to my brother,
Yes.
even though I don't know where he's buried. I
Yes.
can live with it.
Yes.
So all of these themes are coming up in the writings.
Yeah.
We see people like Dr. Tipote, who's reflecting now on a life well lived, and
Yes.
and saying, okay, let me tell you this story of myself, and
Yes.
maybe through this you will be able to glean some kernels of wisdom from it.
Yes.
You know, and I hope more and more older people write. You
Yes.
know, we have Dr. Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman, the late.
Yes.
She
Jellemont.
wrote about her mother. Yeah,
Jellemont.
Jelimo, about her mother.
Mhm.
You know, we have different books. You know, so we have exile. We have return. We have
Yes.
healing. We have trauma.
And
So
even continuing the travel, even continuing to travel. Yes.
yes, yes. So even in Patrice Joa's book, Honor Duko Sky, she talks about why she travels throughout Africa. You know, so these themes, I think, will continue. They will continue, and also we see theme of conflict. You know, and that's not new.
Yeah.
You know, I always come back to the different poems by African writers, and Prof
Mhm.
always laughs at me, but some of them are really, they show you the anger, the anguish of a soul dispossessed from its culture. You
Yes.
know, and we will like read one or two of them after we read the question. I mean, the comments on the show. So if we can read the comments, I don't know. Christopher Togbasi said, where do Liberian writers and authors sell their books? Do we as a society have a modern bookstore in Monrovia? Do we have a modern library in Monrovia? Do we use our own books in our schools and universities? Are we as a society encouraging young writers, new authors? Are we teaching them how to make money from their labor? Do Liberians understand the economy of becoming a writer and author? And Christopher, I would just like to say to you that yes, they do. We have a lot of burgeoning writers coming up. I think our guest who is not on. Patrice Joa wrote a book, I think, about Let Me Be Me or something. Brenda Brewer Moore has books. We have our own esteemed writer, Dr. K. Moses Nangwe, who has written, I swear, Prof, I don't know how many books and articles you've written.
Oh,
Every
Jackie.
time I
Please
go, I'm like,
save me the blotches.
no, we gonna have a 2 hour interview. You're gonna sit down and let me interview you,
I will
because we
run
have
away.
We
No,
have
I'm
Dr.
just
Timote, we have Patrice Chua, we have Patricia Jabe Wesley,
Mhm.
we have a lot of writers, you know, by and we had a national bookstore. My father
Yeah,
had a national
yeah,
bookstore in
yeah. That's
Liberia.
true. That's true.
You know,
That's true.
a two-story national bookstore that
Yeah,
I would hide and read the books.
yeah.
But as for a library, I'm sure that There's some in the making. There's some that are being built. I know Brenda Brewer Moore has reading rooms. Patrice Chua, she has an initiative called Sexy Like a Book, where she encourages young writers and young girls to write. So yes, they do. We use our books sometimes. We do use some of our books in the universities and schools,
And
But whether we are encouraging young
yeah,
writers, encouraging as in state encouraged, I don't know, but as
yeah,
in individually
yeah,
encouraged,
yeah.
yes, there are a lot of now about making money from their labor. You guys have to buy the book. I mean, it's not like every time Prof and I we have an author on, we buy the book. We don't say to them, "Oh, send me the book," except Augustine. Augustine, thank you, Augustine Sharif, send us the book. But we buy the book because we want to keep them. There are some books now you cannot find you know Ebony Dust, I was trying to get a copy. I mean,
Mhm.
it's prohibitively expensive on Amazon. So you can't find some of these books. You cannot find Victoria Tolbert's Lifted Up.
Mhm.
Nowhere you can I find that book.
Yeah.
So you guys have to buy the books of our people, not just say, oh, I'm gonna just read
Mhm.
somebody else's.
Yeah.
You have to help them as well. Oh, and that's
I think
Christopher
that's the same
again.
thing.
Okay.
Uh,
Christopher is writing the same thing. Yeah.
and
But that's why
okay, there is a fellow. He also served as one of the past presidents of the Liberia Association of Writers, Michael Weir. He has
mhm,
this entity called We Care, and
mhm.
I know when some 20 or so years ago when of course I always hear that the entity is still going. He has books people go in there to read and all that, and he's been in the business of encouraging other writers. But the thing about money, money, young writers and money, I when it comes to that particular subject, I kind of hedge a little. There is a temptation to think that as soon as you write just about anything, you must be looking for the money. Any skill, any profession that uh, pursues money in the initial stage is going to lose a whole lot. But if you are out there trying as much as possible to perfect your skill, do it well, in the end, I can assure you that money will chase you. But if you are chasing money and it's not coming, you are likely to become despondent. And that is not a healthy thing to do. So young writers, well, if you've jumped out of the pile and do well, that's a different thing. But a lot more young people, one of the urgent things I would say is uh, pay attention to the skill. Okay, it kind of work on the various aspects of the skill to an extent that once you bolt out of the band, you should be able to do well, even if it is not locally, then of course internationally. So, short, we need young people to work a little bit more. They can kind of engage with older and experienced writers, professionals, and what have you, and that way they will kind of master the skills and move on. Then they can think about the money thing and what have you. Money
Yeah,
is a
and
drug.
I think one way to encourage them is to have like maybe a literary festival also, where they can showcase their talents. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people do. I think that there's a Liberian Writers Network as well. Yeah. And Prof, whatever happened to the Liberian Association of Writers?
It's out there, except
Okay.
that the leadership thing keeps floundering. But it's every night. I think about a few years ago, I helped them celebrate. I was not alone. I helped them celebrate the 30th, I think the 35th anniversary of the founding of the Liberia Association of Writers. So it's still there. There are some older members who are also helping to keep the boat afloat.
And if you perfect your craft, I mean, there's tons of money if you after that, because I mean Chimamanda Adichie, I think she got a MacArthur Genius grant, which is I think 500,000 or something, and
Yeah,
you just write, so the thing is, money should not be the end result.
mhm.
The end result is
It will
putting
come
knowledge.
when it will come.
It will come when it will come. So just write. As Prof said, perfect your craft. So Prof, we come back again to the different themes in poems,
Yeah,
and we're talking about conflict.
yeah,
Right? We're coming back to conflict.
yeah.
So we were and I, I was discussing the because for the French poets or the French students, they were taken to France to turn them into freshmen. So they were
Assimilation.
the assimilation, yeah, yeah. So they were the ones who were most vocal, because they just, so I just wanted I want to read a few lines
Mhm.
of Sigon's poem. He said, "Here we stand, right, poised between two civilizations, finding the balance irksome." And I guess that's what it is. It's this balance that we're trying to find. And Gabriel Okara had said, "When at break of day at a riverside, I hear jungle drums. Then I hear a wailing piano speaking of complex ways," right? But I mean, but the thing is that all of these poems, they show like anguish of the soul, you know. Claude Marquet says, "From the dim regions where my father come, my spirit, bondaged by the body, longs. My soul will sing forgotten songs. I will go back to darkness and peace. But the great western world holds me in fear, and I may never hope for full release."
Mm.
You,
Yeah,
Prof said,
it's there is again um, the poem we talked about from Emily Dickinson, "The soul
yeah,
selects own society and just
close the door.
dumps the rest or what have you." The thing
It
about
closes
it
the
is that
door.
yes, the thing about it is that every one of us at a particular time finds a corner that is cozy enough, finds a corner that kind of perfects the the relevance of being alive. If there is certain force or a certain voice that takes you from that particular corner, it troubles the soul. So when you come to the situation where young people from francophone countries went to European
Friend.
countries or what have you, France, Belgium, and all those places there. The idea was that they saw before they left for these places, the places themselves so glorified their their ambience, their environment, that this young person or these young people leaving from Africa that is supposed to be jungle, that is supposed to be a trash land, what have you, they went over there and then they had the shock of their lives to find out, oh my God, these people are also human beings. Oh my God, these people are capable of of inflicting pain and all that kind of thing. These things kind of stir something horrible in the young people. And when they decided to revolt, they decided to revolt.
Revolt, yeah.
So that's the kind of thing, especially, talk about assimilation, meaning we are the same. And we get over there, no, we are not the same. No, we are not the same in terms of where we go, what we do, what we eat, and what we are not the same. And that kind of broke the whole excitement, and they wanted to make sure that the world knew where they stood as far as this whole celebratory thing about the white is good, the France country is good, Belgium is good and what have you. Said no, that is, in fact, it is this same phenomenon that impacted Frantz Fanon. Frantz
Yes.
Fanon in the kind of books he wrote. Okay.
Yeah. In Black Skin, White Mask, and in
Yes.
the Wretched of the Earth, that is the signature piece of the psyche of the colonized.
Yes.
Because he was a psychologist, right?
Yes. Yes.
Psychiatrist.
A psychiatrist. Yes.
Yeah. And then he started to see soldiers, like people from other cultures coming in.
Yes.
And he started to see that these people had a commonality
Yeah.
of their ailment,
Yes.
which was either they were so dispossessed
Yes.
that they wanted to
Yes.
be like the colonizer.
Yes.
And Frantz Fanon, when he wrote Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Mask,
Yes.
he said, you can never be an original of an original.
Yes.
Because the more you copy it, you will be a caricature of that person or that culture. It's like a buffoon. So it's like when you're photocopying something, right? The more you photocopy it, the fuzzier it gets.
Yes.
Because the more away from the original it begins.
Yes.
I mean, it becomes. So that's why it's important. So Frantz Fanon, when he wrote Wretched of the Earth, really, he was talking about these people are wretched because they spend their entire life wanting to be. I want, and actually, Prof, before you go on, I wanted to read Amy Cizier's Sale because he says, I feel ridiculous in their shoes, in their tuxedo, in their dress shirt, in their monocle. I feel ridiculous with my toes that were not made to sweat from morning to evening. I feel ridiculous. I feel ridiculous. So he goes on to talk about it. But yeah, I think that Frantz Fanon, people should read Frantz Fanon because you would see the psyche of the colonized person who always wants to either be the colonizer or want to do things that the colonizer would love them.
Always looking for a validation slip.
Validation
slip. Yes.
So what I have is not good enough until this person says it's good.
Yes. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. No.
That's
So yeah. Focus on Liberia says how are Liberian literature from other African literature. Many Liberians grew up reading Nigerian novels like Things Fall Apart. What is in Liberian literature that we can Liberian readers of foreign literature? Well, I would say that African literature is not foreign literature. I would say, because we discussed that in the beginning, that we talk about the commonalities that's in African literature: love of tradition, love of community, and things like that. Liberians have commonality in themes and then divergence. So you can have somebody like Chimamanda writing about half of the Yellow Sun, about the Biafra War. And then you can have Patrice Joa writing her poetry about the war in Liberia. So you have conflict in the country, civil conflict, and people writing. So the commonalities are there, the themes are there. I think they will diverge when they start to talk about checkpoints or the Patawi Falls or Monrovia and things like that. But I think that the winning is not what we want. We want to introduce Liberians to more African literature. And what happened is that when I was growing up, I mean, as you should, these are foundational literature. I read Shakespeare, I read Chaucer, Canterbury Tales, right, Prof? You guys were giving us English literature, Tom Sawyer. We read those things. And then further up, it seemed as if Liberia discovered African literature. And they were telling us, oh, read Things Fall Apart, read Things Fall Apart. But that is not to say that it can be either or. We can read both of them. Yeah.
It's because hey, like I said earlier, we are talking about the human story. We are talking about the human story. Whether you talk about British literature, you talk about American literature, you talk about Russian literature, and what have you. At the heart of it, if you read these sectoral literatures and you understand them, you get to appreciate more the universality of humanity. And this understanding of the universality of humanity is very much important in terms of how you deal with problems, in terms of how you deal with conflicts as they move from one area of the world to the other. You don't get to the point of saying, well, I am not from part of this world. I remember in 1967, 60, the Biafran War. um, we will go to school. I was in the early part of junior high school. Must have been seventh grade or something like that. And who cared about? I mean, I don't say that in a callous way, but who cared about the Biafran War? We hadn't seen the images, or even if we saw the images for the one or two black and white TVs that were around, you know, this thing didn't get to you. But when we had our war, where some of us were so skinny that if you were not very careful, you thought it was a skeleton walking the streets, and you had to run away to say, well, I think that thing I saw was not a human being, until you reach to that person and say, oh, you are a human being. I see your eyes moving and all that kind of a thing. So the whole idea is that sometimes suffering is not a kind of recognized significantly until it comes to us. But even so, the idea that we are reading about all these things will have an impact when the real thing happens to all of us, and then we get to understand what it is. Let us even talk about the flaws and other. I look at pictures on TVs and saw how someone would be in the house, and a whole flood of water will like cover that person and what have you. Things that you would think about when you think about Africa. Yet in this place called America, all of a sudden, human beings became powerless. Human beings became powerless and what have you. All these things about flood stories, about flood tragedies and all that kind of a thing are all part and parcel of what needs to be understood as we talk about literature.
But also, Prof, before we go to Genesis question, focus on Liberia question. People coming back to the comment somebody wrote about, do Liberians write? And before you had Things Fall Apart, which was in the 1950s, right?
Yes.
We always like to remind people that in 1891 or 92, the first
91,
African novel, 1891, the first African novel written in English was written by a Liberian, Joseph Waters, right?
Yes,
Joseph Waters,
yes,
Guyana Power. We discussed Guyana Power on this show. The first African novel written, first novel in English written by an African was written by a Liberian. And I would dare to say the second novel written in 1932 by, what's his name?
1932, yes.
Charles Roberts?
Charles Cooper.
Charles
Who is
Cooper,
Bafili Kali.
Love in Ebony, was also written by a Liberian. So you have two books that almost set the stage for Chinua Achebe and the others, and these books were written by men, and I always call them, they are feminist novels, written by men. So if you don't have copies of it, I would urge you to get copies of Love in Ebony and Guyana Power and read them. Acquaint yourself with Liberian literature, because there's so much we can be proud of when it comes to literature. Focus on Liberia says, where should a new writer begin from to develop his or her skills in writing? Okay, Prof, that's your domain.
No, but the thing about it is, I probably will start with myself in that context. I remember beginning how to write or taking interest in writing. Sometimes I thought that writers did not live. I never thought of a living writer until at some point in time. But the idea that somebody somewhere will kind of build the interest in you to read little tracts, little tracts, and give you a kind of encouragement. That sort of a thing should be it. So if you want to be a writer, uh, let someone who has shown interest in books be able to be the one to nudge you from the back, to take interest in reading little things, little asset tracks. You call chapbooks. Chapbooks, that's what we call booklets and what have you. So you've got to build that interest. And the other thing is that people who love telling stories or love listening to stories, that is also a beginning of taking interest. Because if you read a story that is very interesting, at some point in time, you want to try hands at your own way of telling a story or writing a story too. Um,
Yeah.
at every moment, find something to celebrate with that person. Find something to encourage that person. It doesn't have to be a monumental type of work, but something that starts the process is good to go. I remember my first little ugly poem was what thing was that? Love. Stupid me. At that
The
at
universal
that
condition.
at that little early age of 11 years and what have you,
Oh,
I wrote I wrote
11.
I wrote a poem. I hid it somewhere, and it turned out my Peace Corps volunteer teacher. I mistakenly gave her that copybook. There was an assignment in it, and Lord, of course, she I still treasure her to this day. She didn't ridicule me. She didn't frown at me or whatever. She smiled and then she said, "Oh, you're writing about love." It's almost like, how did that come about? I said, well, don't mind this rascal boy. Anyway, with that, once she saw my interest in poetry, she gave me small little books, pamphlets, and what have you to read. And every time I did one or two, she will, did you write something today? And then, of course, I'll be shy, but then I will give it. So there is so many things to do to get to the point of encouraging people. Don't shy them away by kind of ridiculing them or chastising them for taking up one theme as opposed to the other. Encourage them in whatever way possible.
Yeah, I agree. And also encourage young writers. Um, when your child comes to you and wants to tell you a story,
Mm-hmm.
or wants to say something to you,
Yeah.
you can encourage them and say, and then what happened? And then
Yes.
what happened? Too
Yes.
many times, and the child wants to say something, and you say, oh, shut up,
Yeah.
or be quiet. You
Yes.
know, we used to play a game where they would say, once upon a time. So we start to build the story. Once upon a time, and then somebody would say there was a man, and then the other person, they don't know the story. They will say, and a woman too,
Yes.
and a baby, and
Yeah.
people will start making story, and then
Characters
they
get
don't
into the
finish.
picture. Yes.
Yeah, so we start to improvise to
Mhm.
build a story,
Yeah.
and put the pieces together to create a coherent whole.
Yeah.
So you can encourage kids like that. You can encourage kids to write. I mean, we want good young writers. And well, I would say young writers. Maybe they are not good at that age,
Yeah.
but they will blossom
Yeah.
into it. I mean, for
Encourage
me,
them. Mhm.
those that know me, like Prof knows that I was one of the most quiet persons in Liberia.
Shy,
I wouldn't
shy,
say a
shy,
word,
shy.
but I lived through books. I would go to my father's bookstore, hide under the table so he doesn't see me reading romantic books, any kind of book. Jeffrey Archer, Danielle Steele. I just started reading, and then I developed love for that because I would say, "Oh, but I could write a book better than that person." I would start critiquing the book. So encourage young people to write, and you yourself. I don't think that if you're writing for self, that there can be bad writing.
Mhm.
You can think, you can reflect, you can write. I mean, even in this country, I see that a lot of the teachers tell the kids to keep journals.
Yeah.
When my baby was growing up, she'll be like, I'm writing in my journal today. And I would say, let me see. She's like, no, it's private. But that's how they get in a habit. So I would say encourage them to write. Don't let them read by rote. We talked about when I was in Dua Zone, Prof. I told you I was at this orphanage and I took the book to read and I started to read the book and I was like, once upon a time, and everybody in the class went, once upon a time. I'm like, what? And I said, no, listen, let me tell you the story. And I read the story. And what I would do, the class got so quiet, Prof. So what I would do, I would stop before turning the page. And they were so engrossed. They would say, turn the page, turn the page, turn the page, because they wanted to know. So then they listen instead of just repeating everything. So encourage people. When you're going home, I always say people ask us to bring things for them, but they never ask us to bring a book. But take
Mhm.
books, leave the book. In Ithaca, we have little books. You put a little post office, a little mailbox, and you put books in it. Each one, you can take one, leave a book, take a book, and people walk around taking books to read. And I think the same thing in the airport.
Yeah.
You can read a book and just leave it there. Somebody can pick up the book and read. So let us nurture reading in Liberia. Let us get in the habit of nurturing reading. Let us get in the habit of reading. I know sometimes there's no electricity, like Patrice, but when there is, let us read. Read to each other. Say, oh, let's do book clubs, and that's one of the things we're discussing. So let's do that. So let's look at some of the uh, let's have book shows. Yes, Christopher, I agree with that's what we're talking about. Literary festival, Liberian Writers Awards night. Yes, we don't we can't only just have musicians. We should have awards night. Let's have book shows and Liberian Awards night. Yes. So I think so. I think that that no country has developed without an educated citizenry.
Yeah.
So if a child picks up a book and reads, he might want to pick up a school book. He might want to pick up another book.
Yeah.
So I would say let's encourage our young writers. For those of you who are older and would like to write, no theme is a singular theme.
Yeah.
Everything is universal.
Mhm.
So if you're writing about trauma, there are people with trauma. If you're writing about healing, there are people who healing will resonate with them. If you're writing about love as a precocious 11-year-old, there's
You better stop.
there's another precocious 12-year-old
Is
waiting.
it not
So
is it not part of escapism? The idea.
at 11, Prof, at 11 years.
Just leave me alone.
So we would
Yeah.
we would love to have your suggestions about literary awards. Prof and I, we've been talking about it. We focus on Liberia,
Yeah.
and we might. Yeah, you see, Eugenia Jai is laughing at you that you were a precocious 11-year-old writing love poems. Yeah, but yeah. So we thank you for joining us. As we said in the beginning, Patrice had problems with the electricity. I don't need to tell you anything more. LEC. And we say, man plans and God laughs. So
Mhm.
today was not the day for man to be planning. But as always, before Prof steps in to give his last comments, we want to thank you for joining us every Friday. We know that Friday is the day you want to go out, you want to chill, but we thank you for joining us. Really, we enjoy doing this. Sometimes I tell Prof, oh, Prof, I'm tired. I don't want to read the book.
Mhm.
But Prof encourages me, and I hope I encourage him. We do
Yeah.
have a lot of discussions behind the scene. Tuesday, I'm hiding because Prof is calling me. Because when Prof calls, it's like 2 hours, we're still discussing themes. And I'm like, Prof, I need to go to bed or I need to eat. So we do work behind the scenes before, and we thank you for joining us, and we thank you. We ask you to tell others about the show. If there's a book you want us to read, if there's an author you want us to bring on, we could do it. We've been telling some of our most ardent supporters that we want to do book clubs. Maybe once a month we will discuss it. But as I say, my co-host, Prof, and I will discuss that and get back to you. So I will let Prof say his closing comments before we leave you with a few words.
Let us kind of hear the conclusion of the whole matter, and that is the more you seek to understand yourself, the more you will eventually seek to understand other people. And the more you do that, somewhere, somehow, the understanding of humanity will come in. And once it comes in, things like empathy, things like sympathy, things like working to create a near perfect world will come into the picture. So what we have been doing today, especially today, has been looking at the self within the context of other forms of literature. We will urge you to always reflect on your own life. And once you reflect on your own life, you try as much as possible to do something about it. And we hope it is positive, and that positivity will kind of spread around very well, and will help make this world a beautiful place. If it is a country, we will help make the country a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. And we thank you again for joining us. As we say, we'll reschedule Patrice Jua for another day, and hopefully LEC will cooperate on that day. We
Mm-hmm.
thank you for joining us, and we say whether you are a new writer,
Yeah,
whether you are an old writer,
yeah,
whether you are thinking of writing,
yeah,
whether you have written before,
yeah.
please, as we always say, uplift Liberia. We are all Liberians, and we'll leave you with this song to remind you. But also, don't forget, mask up. Tell your friends and family in Liberia to mask up. Be safe, and good night.
We all are